So, Brian Ida is a painter whose initial exposure and pursuit of the arts was in the form of music. This passion for music eventually led to the study of electronic music composition in college. His transition to painting began in 1988 when he started working for Sam Francis as his studio assistant in Palo Alto. Brian started painting with Sam Francis's techniques with acrylic paint, dyes, and water, but he knew he wanted to pursue his own path. He began using oil paints to develop a glazing technique that he explored for over 10 years. Glazing is the use of thin, mostly transparent paint that is layered to create amazing depth and volume. Later, he wanted to find another area to develop his sense of composition and further his ideas of layering. Brian began experimenting with layering paint inside multiple thick layers of epoxy, essentially isolating each layer from one another. The physical separation of the layers gave a sense of depth, volume, and detachment, and he used this technique as inspiration for the next series of paintings. 4 years ago, Brian was compelled to go in another direction by the change in the cultural environment and the divisiveness that was growing in our everyday lives. He embarked on the series of portraits that we'll see today in an attempt to view the current social climate within a historical context. Brian, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Okay, so I'm showing a series of portraits that tell the stories of individuals standing in the face of institutional racism and discrimination. The series is called Context. It features ink on panel drawings that bring light to the emotional narratives of people who are connected and share common experiences through time. Everyone has in their family history a record of man's inhumanity towards man. It's a function of the human condition. We stand here today in defiance of unwarranted injustice taken against us or our ancestors. I wanted to put each person in context with an historical document and use their story as the pillar upon which they stand. I wanted to dig deep and build a relationship between history and current affairs and point out the historical events as examples of lessons once learned but are being forgotten today. I research government documents and use the text from the documents to render each subject with the very words that oppress them. Writing the words on top of themselves over and over allows me to create light and dark areas. This creates shadow and highlights that together can be used to define the form. In artistic terms, it's called value, where value is simply how light or dark an area is. So black and white is a simplification of perception. This show has been up at the museum since August, with no one able to see the show live because of the pandemic. I wanted to figure out a way to present the work that overcame the challenges of online viewing. I went to a lot of Zoom presentations and virtual reality shows, and I wanted to take it a step further in describing the structure and history of each subject. I needed a way to show the detail and rigor that went into each piece. I liked the idea of creating a short video for each portrait. I could control how the viewer experienced the work and present a narrative at the same time, explaining the historical context of the subject and the document. I tried to make the video feel as if I were walking you through the gallery and talking about the work. I spent the last months putting together videos to present the work along with a narrative and music that embellished the emotion contained within the piece. The videos introduce the concept behind the series gradually within the narrative as you progress through the series of videos. I want to introduce a few of the videos now and invite any discussion or questions they might inspire. One of the first portraits I did was of my grandfather. This is a portrait of my grandfather. It's a drawing based on a photograph taken of him as he was waiting to board a bus that would take him to the Topaz internment camp for Americans of Japanese descent in Delta, Utah. The photo was taken by famed photographer Dorothea Lange, who along with Ansel Adams worked for the War Relocation Authority to document the forced evacuation of Japanese Americans from the west coast of the United States. She was documenting in San Francisco at the beginning of the internment and took 3 photographs of my father, grandfather, and grandmother. In 1942, after the U.S. entered World War II, following the attack on Pearl Harbor, 112,000 Japanese Americans were separated by race and interred in 10 concentration camps across the country. Among those, 60% were American-born citizens, and the rest were first-generation Japanese, unable by law to get citizenship. Dorothea Lange's photos depicted her contrary point of view and were hidden away in the National Archive until 2006, when they were released to the public. I use words as my mark to render my grandfather. In this case, the words I am using are the text from Executive Order 9066, which was an executive order signed by FDR that established military areas, excluding those of Japanese descent, and establishing the internment camps away from the West Coast. In this series of portraits, I portray individuals as the embodiment of strength and pride, standing in the face of oppression by a power against them. I research and reference texts from government documents and use the words to render each person with the document that affects them. Using the word as a building block does not label or define the subject by the words being used. Instead, they are blended together and transformed from a label to a broader gesture that is used to define a new visual standard of vitality and beauty. Through my grandfather, I'm able to tell the story of the Japanese-American internment during World War II and relate it to myself and our current climate. I had known of this photograph and many more taken by Dorothea Lange when she was commissioned to document the internment by the War Relocation Authority, as her photo archive resides in the National Archives. Because her photos reflected her empathy for her subjects, they were initially censored and hidden, unseen until after the war. The photo of my father, grandfather, and grandmother was featured in a show at the Smithsonian National Museum of History titled A More Perfect Union, Japanese Americans and the U.S. Constitution in 1987. My parents had gone to the show and were surprised to see that it was one of the first photos they saw as they walked in. As I searched the National Archive for another project I was working on, I came across 2 more photos of my father taken by Dorothea Lange when he was 17 years old, going to prison for no other reason than his race. That's it. Is there any question?
I'm going to hop in here. As we said earlier in the program, we're going to be allowing folks to ask Q&A or questions after each video, so that way you can talk about each individual piece. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. There's a little icon at the bottom of your screen. One thing I wanted to just mention is that, Brian, you actually composed that music that went along with it as well.
Yeah,
right?
I was like you said before, I studied electronic music composition, and that was like 25 years ago, and I literally, when I started painting, I dropped. I got rid of everything musical. I didn't play music for 25 years, and then I had this idea to do the videos, and I mean that's basically my training, is to create emotion. And it was interesting to have the concept of time come back in, where it's like when you view a piece live, you get the entirety of the piece within a second. Like when you see the piece, you get its entirety. With music, time is controlled by the artist or the musician, so it's different way of seeing it, and thinking about the piece and creating the narrative and creating like an emotional context musically. So it was kind of nice to get back into it. I just used like the free software on Macs, like it's called GarageBand, where it's pretty versatile. I mean, but back when I was doing electronic music in the 80s, it was much less than what GarageBand does for free now, much less. So it was
Amazing.
interesting to get back into it.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions here. One is, I noticed the tone of the transcript changed as the video played. Was that intentional?
The black and white, it, the for the text underneath, the text was initially like kind of, I wanted it to go quickly, so it's like you it's obviously the executive order 9066, and I wanted it to go quickly, so it's almost like I have to go back and look at the video again, so it's creating another way of registering the words of the document in a different way. So that's like you want to go back and see it again and go and then read that. And the first time through, you might listen to the narrative and look at the graphics. So it's kind of a new way. And for changing black and white was just the way of contrasting with the background and then the white of the piece. So it's the only way to view the words. Because again, the software that I use to make the videos is pretty rudimentary, so I couldn't really do everything I wanted to do with the text. I just did what I could with the tools I had. I didn't, because I definitely never video edited before, so it was like, and the first one was my grandfather. So the concept was to have the text go very quickly on the bottom. So it was like, oh, it was like the idea of transforming the word, and the word's not really super clear, and it changes from this document of hate into this thing of beauty, and then it's not quite legible. So, but later on, I made the words a little bit slower so you could actually read them. So the videos, because I did 14 videos in about 6 weeks, I
Wow.
just ripped through them, and so the ideas for the words changed a little bit, not too much, but just a little bit. And I used the same tools, and yeah, this so powerful for free. It's all on the Mac. Like I used GarageBand and iMovie, and
Wow, we've
yeah.
got a bunch of questions popping up now. So, first one actually came from, I'm not sure who it came from originally, but it says, "Hi, Brian, can you please put up the image again of your grandfather? How long did the work take you to make? Did your father see the work? What was your family's reaction to the work?"
No, my father didn't see the work. He passed away like 10 years ago. Um, uh, he saw this original. This is the original photograph that he saw originally at that show at the Smithsonian. So literally, they walked in and they saw it. And my dad saw it himself. He's like, "Oh my god!" So he was pretty shocked. And then, so we knew of this photograph. And then, like I said, I was doing research through the National Archive. I went through all of Dorothea Lange's archive in the National Archive for the Internment, and I was going through it, and I go, "God, that looks like my dad." And then I went through it again, and then I didn't. I was going pretty quickly. I was just looking for like an image that I wanted to use for another shot. And I go, that looks like my dad. Like, and I went back and I confirmed, because he has this hat on, this hat and this goofy collar. And I went back and I had to confirm that it was him. I mean, like looking through like that quickly, you go, "Oh, that looks my dad," and then you see the hat. It's pretty amazing, because
That's
we have
great.
3 shots shot by Dorothea Lange of my father. So I have them up in my studio, and it's pretty amazing, because she's like the best documentarian photographer probably in the world.
Certainly, these photos really, tell a story.
Yeah,
And
and the National I gotta say, the National Archive's free. You can actually have the files downloaded, and they're pretty. They can print up to like 8 by 10, probably the file size they give you, and they're pretty. dusted out. I mean, they have dust on it, you got to clean them up. But it's amazing that it's free. You have free access to it. All the I think there's like 100,000 digital images maybe or something like that. It's all free.
What an excellent resource. I think
Yeah.
the person actually wanted to see your work, though, the
Oh,
actual image of your
do I have that?
grandfather. And then, let's see. Oh, and then another question from Rich says, where were your grandparents and parents from?
My dad was from San Francisco, so this was San Francisco. This was shot going as they were boarding the bus to go to Topaz in Utah, and then my mom went to Poston from Salinas, so they were both West Coast.
And then, what was it like to find out your personal family history intersected with this larger American history, discovering that your father and grandparents were photographed by one of the most well known American photographers of the 20th century at such a devastating moment in their lives?
Yeah, that we didn't. My parents didn't really talk about it. My mom still doesn't like to talk about it. So we didn't have much. My uncle was an archivist. He archived a lot of the stuff, so I knew a little bit through him. But we didn't really grow up like, oh, you're conscious of this whole injustice that happened to the family. They didn't really talk about it. They just moved on and built a life, and they didn't talk about it. I mean, if I asked them specifically, they would definitely talk about it. And my dad served. The one of the pieces that I have in the show is my one of these. I think this image actually. I did a piece on this, and my father was in the military intelligence service, so I told the story of the military intelligence service during World War II, and they served as interpreters, interrogators in the Pacific Theater for translating, and interrogating prisoners.
My grandfather was also in the military intelligence
Yeah.
service. Yeah. I think the image that they're looking for is the one that you were the actual art that you made. Do you have that?
I can't go back for some reason. Oh, there. That's the. I can't.
Yeah.
I
And
can't really
is there
zoom in on it.
You can't zoom in. Yeah,
It's
I
the
think that's
video.
what folks are
Yeah.
sort of asking. Right. Maybe can you, well, I don't know, maybe you can mute it and then play it so that we can kind of, they can kind of see it again and we can kind of continue our discussion.
I don't know how to mute it.
I know this is technology. It's tough adapting to this new world.
Let me just do this. Like that? The detail of
Ah,
that?
yeah. I think that's kind
There
of
we go.
what folks are looking for a
Yeah.
little bit more.
So the text, like I said, the text scrolling through, not scrolling, but appearing on the bottom is the Executive Order 9066, and that was intentionally like vague, so you couldn't see it. And you can also see through these portraits that my progression as a technician in black and white, because I came from super colorful stuff. I mean, I came from color field, and this is like black and white is just the complete opposite, and plus portraits is the complete opposite. So I really wanted to challenge myself and learn, like make my weakness my strength, because I thought my portraiture was the weakest part of my what I could do as an artist. So I completely embedded myself in it. And
Challenge.
in drawing with words is not easy, because like if you want to do like a straight mark and you have an S coming up in the text, I stayed true to it. So you're like, oh man, so you can tell that it gets kind of blurry. Like it blurs the definition of the portrait, which is pretty neat. It's got its own look.
Is there any way you can go a little bit closer? And by the way, the volume seems to be in like I think the lower right hand corner. There's a little
Oh, it's all the way.
sort of sliding. Yeah.
Is it too high?
Um. Well, just so folks can see the words, because I think they want to see how you actually put the words into.
Oh yeah, they're just pretty much
Yeah, there. Okay. Yeah, I think
pretty
you
much
can.
right on top of each other.
Wow, that's amazing.
You'll see in the third video that I present, it's like it's all black. Her robe is all black, so that literally took 3 months. It was crazy. That was I think the first one I did was that one. This was the second one.
And then a few more questions here. Sonia is asking, is the photo of the grocery store related to your family?
That's the show at the Smithsonian. So that was just a reference photograph of the show that in the Smithsonian in 1987 that my parents went to. I just put that in there as way to bring up the show. That was the first place they saw the photograph.
And John asks if you're considering any of the internment pictures taken by Ansel Adams for future work.
I don't know. I like how I like things coming kind of organically. So I meet people. It was actually hard early on to get people to, because it's super personal, the stories that you're asking people to tell through these portraits. I mean, I don't use first names or anything like that. I don't refer specifically to them unless they want me to. But it's a pretty hard. I think it's a pretty hard ask to tell your family's story. I mean, obviously I can do it because it's mine. But I mean, you'll see the next one, Elon. I mean, that's a hard ask, and it's hard to get people to do it. But now it's a little bit easier because people see the series and it's like, oh, this is a pretty cool series. I would like to be involved in that in some way, and then being a subject of it. Because I mean, we all have stories of, we all have stories that we walk around with, and everybody has a story, and you never know what they're going through at the moment.
That's so true. Two more questions, and then I want to let you move on to the next one. Are the words the executive order in its entirety from Angela?
Yeah, I did. So I probably went through 10 times to do the portrait, and then for the words going across the bottom, the actual text going across the bottom, that was kind of the point of this video when I was figuring out the timing of it. So I wanted to fit the whole thing in. So that's why it's kind of quickly through there, and that's another reason why it's quick. I wanted to fit the whole thing through there, and then later on I didn't worry so much about fitting the whole document into the video. It was more conceptual anyway, so I kind of changed my rules.
And there are a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say that John and Jane are asking about how do you decide which parts of executive order go where?
I literally start writing from the bottom up. I just start. It's like I block it in, and then using form the line, because you're writing in linear form with the sentences that you use. So let's see. You can kind of see. I mean, in the brim of the hat, you'll see like the initial form is there, and then I just start filling in for the shadows. So there's probably maybe 3 or 4 layers of writing on the brim of the hat, the shadow. You'll see it in like I said, the third one is like the dark robe that took forever. It was ridiculous.
Well, we'll let you go to the next.
These are 5 feet tall too. They're not small.
Yeah.
The scale the scale is crazy. I think you can barely reach across it for how much writing it's done. It's like my hands, I think, permanently messed up.
Really putting yourself into your art. I'm going to let you continue on since I know you have more videos to show us, and I'll come back after.
Another narrative told in this series is the story of Elon's father. His incredibly heart-wrenching story of survival when the Nazis occupied Poland in 1939 is riveting and must never be forgotten. I am honored Elon had trusted me to relate a small portion of his father's story. In 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland from the west, while the Soviets invaded from the east. By 1941, the Germans had reached the village of Tlust, where Elon's father, 2 aunts, and his grandparents were living under Soviet rule. Once occupied, the Nazis seized all property and businesses of the Jewish people, including his family's home and flour mill business, and forced them into a Jewish ghetto where they lived under appalling conditions. Eventually, the German SS started conducting mass roundups and executions. His grandmother and 2 aunts were marched to a cemetery. They were shot, killed, and buried in a mass grave. Somehow, his father and grandfather escaped to the forests and hid, living with partisan resistance groups in the forests surrounding their village. His father and grandfather would later encounter a Nazi-sanctioned Ukrainian militia who then shot and killed his grandfather while leaving his father unharmed and alone, saying he was too young to survive. His father would survive, hiding in a bunker, subsisting on almost nothing for 6 months before ending up in a Nazi labor camp until he was set free by the Allies in 1945. The words used to render the portrait of Elon are the Nuremberg race laws of 1935. These laws institutionalized many of the racial theories prevalent in Nazi ideology and were implemented to ostracize, discriminate, and expel Jews from German society, and were a stepping stone to the mass executions that were to follow. Elon states, "It's my responsibility to bear witness for all of them."
Can you see me?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Gosh,
Yeah, so
that
you can
one's
see the
really,
stories are heavy.
yeah,
And then the portraits in high contrast to that, like the beauty and the strength of the person standing there.
definitely. And I know you mentioned we're lucky enough to have Elon here with us today, actually. So, thank you, Elon, for joining us, and thank you for sharing your story and your family story. Um, do folks have any questions about this piece in particular, or is there anything else you want to say about it, Brian?
That pretty much. I mean, that's nothing much more to say about that one. It's all there, and I just the videos having the narrative like that going with the video has been, for me, it's been like a blessing, because you can tell so much more of the story of the portrait. Like when you see the portraits live, you encounter them and you go, oh, that's nice, it's done with words, and then you might look deeper into the card that has a little bit of the story, and then I have on the card there's a QR code that goes deep into the story, and this is a way of going deeper without having the commitment of, or just being able to, I don't know, it's just for combining the music and the emotion, and having my voice telling the story of my piece and Elon's piece story is it's been really good. To me it's been good to do these videos, to revisit the pieces, because like you do the piece and then you're done, and then now you got to revisit it and do more research into the documentation and the time period, and it's been really good for me, and hopefully it comes through these videos. I mean, these narratives are super informative, and they're bringing history to the context of today. So it's doing what I want the pieces to do.
Certainly. I feel like they're so impactful. I personally really like to hear the stories behind the pieces, especially because, you never know what the artist had in mind. There's some questions here. One from Julie that says, "How did you meet Elon?" And also another one earlier asked how you find your subjects to paint.
So I've known Elon's a photographer. He's in the LA art scene, so I've known him for a long time. He's a very good friend, and he actually shot the protester piece. I used his archive. He was shooting the protests from the elections from 2016. What was that other question on?
Yeah, how do you choose your subjects?
It's mostly through. I well, it's different. Like you meet people and you might hear something of a story, or you have an idea for like you have a document that you want to definitely do a piece on. So you got to find a story that fits that. So it's kind of either way. But like I said, it was in the beginning. It was really hard. It was hard to find people. Now it's a little bit easier, but it's just like these stories are so personal. You got to find the right person that wants to, and then they they're usually paying tribute to their ancestors because the documents go pretty far back sometimes. They have to have a powerful reason to to participate. I think.
And a question from Jane says, in the exhibit, does the video play or are the videos done after the fact? How is the German order incorporated at the exhibit other than being written into the art piece? And
Yeah,
just a reminder to folks, if you could just write your questions in the Q&A just to have them all in one place, that would be great.
the German order is in the live show. It's just in the piece, and it's like I said. I have the card, the card that goes along with the piece has reference to the like the document is the order, and then there's a QR code that links to a web page that if you pull it up right there, it has a lot of information. Like you can go much deeper dive. I don't. Yeah, it's a much deeper dive, and this was a afterthought after the fact that the no one could see the show live, so you have to figure out a way to present this work specifically because it's so detailed. Like if you saw this picture right here on your computer, you wouldn't even know what's happening. You go, oh, it's a portrait. You wouldn't know that it's how much went into it, how big it is, and how just the detail and the technique that went into doing it is different.
Yeah,
So
I remember
I did the videos later.
I remember seeing the images on the website and kind of being like, wow, that looks like a really interesting style. And then reading about what it was actually made of and
Yeah,
being able to look closer and being like, wow, it's just so much more appreciation for that,
yeah, and
the historical
it's
context.
been great for me to do because I love history. So it's been great for me to be able to research history and put this stuff and then bring it all into current times. It's great for me. I mean, I'm inspired, so I'm going to continue doing it, and I might change the format. Like it's all been this 60 by 37 vertical isolated portraits, and I'm thinking I want to do something where it's things come together. I mean, there's a couple pieces that I did. The Toyo Miyatake has three subjects in it, so that's a departure, and it's going towards something. I don't know. I was thinking like Last Supper-ish, where it's bringing together all these different people in one gathering, um, in multiple panels. I don't know though. Something like that.
There are some more questions here. One is, how many paintings are in this series?
I just finished one on the American with Disabilities Act, so I think there's 15.
15.
My initial goal is 18, so maybe we'll reach that as far as this format. And like I said, I want to do something change, and I don't know. It feels like I need to do something not different, but add other elements, like maybe a little bit of painting, a little bit of color, or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that actually ties into another question here. Why are the backgrounds all white for each piece?
Isolation. It's like an isolated. Everyone's isolated. Everyone is
Mm.
individual and has these stories that I didn't want to. I did tie in with my grandfather with the luggage because I thought that was relevant, and I did another one with Marcus where I depicted him seated, and so it's like half power, and then I had the sidewalk line just to have reference for the fact that he's seated. Um, but yeah, I wanted to be isolated and separate, no connection, everyone with an individual story.
Great. Thank you for sharing that and for sharing Elon's story with all of us. Oh, there is, I think these are comments. So I will let you go on to the third
Okay,
video and we'll see if folks
one
have
more
more
video.
questions.
I'll
Okay.
introduce one more video and then we'll. I originally started this series of portraits as a response to the Muslim ban in 2017, which was one of the first actions Trump took as president after his inauguration on January 20th. Although Obama had used Twitter as a form of communication in the previous administration, Trump had multiplied his use and transformed Twitter into an unofficial source of communication for the office of president. He was tweeting a lot, trying to justify the idea of an immigration ban from Muslim countries. I came up with the idea to use the words of these tweets to render a portrait of my neighbor as she was going to her mosque for service. The first portrait took about 3 months to finish as I endlessly wrote out Trump's tweets, words covering words to form the dark areas, while I figured out how to render the highlights and shadows using words as the mark. The U.S. has a long history of using immigration as a weapon. I thought about the Muslim ban and how similar it is to what my parents experienced during World War II and the Japanese internment. The intent of this series of ink on panel portraits is to portray individuals as the embodiment of strength and pride, standing defiantly in the face of oppression by a power against them. With the current social and political environment and the recent acts that repeat past abuse and injustice, I am examining historic events in the context of the contemporary climate. On January 27, 2017, one of the first acts the newly inaugurated president took was to sign Executive Order 13769, titled Protecting the Nation from Foreign Terrorist Entry into the United States. It banned foreign nationals from 7 predominantly Muslim countries from visiting the country for 90 days, suspended entry to the country of all Syrian refugees indefinitely, and prohibited any refugees from coming into the country for 120 days. It was known as the Muslim ban. There is a long history of exclusion and restrictive immigration policies by race in the United States. Our nation's first immigration law passed in 1790 with a restrictive requirement that only free white persons qualified for citizenship. It specifically excluded Native Americans, indentured servants, and both enslaved and free black people from access to citizenship. Later in the 1800s, because of growing fears the Chinese immigrants were taking all the jobs and were a threat to society, Congress passed the first of 3 Chinese Exclusion Acts in 1882 that banned Chinese immigration to the U.S. It was not until 1943, when China and the United States became allies during World War II, that the exclusion laws were repealed. In the 1900s, as immigration started shifting from white Protestants from Northern and Western Europe to mostly Catholic and Jewish immigrants from Russia, Austria, and Italy, Congress passed the National Origins Act in 1924, establishing a quota system to limit the number of immigrants entering the United States. This is a portrait of my neighbor in my apartment building as she is going to her mosque for worship, a simple act of freedom made more difficult by the words and actions of our government. The president has chosen Twitter as an unofficial channel to disseminate words and actions of the office. The marks are made from writing out all of the president's tweets from Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2017 to September 25th, 2017, 1,550 entries.
Thank you. I keep thinking when I see that one, gosh, just how long that must have taken you. And really, I love just how you can see all of the folds
Yeah,
in the garment. It's just really beautiful. So
you can see it's an early one too, because like the fingers kind of look like sausages. I didn't really have. I was just developing the technique and shading and
well, now that you
yeah.
pointed that out, now I'm looking at
Yeah, but
them.
you look at the ones did later. It's like, oh, there's the fingers, there's the fingernails and the joints and the form of that. Like, it's just, yeah, it was. This is like literally just starting. This was the first one, and the writing was really. I just started out writing like super tiny, just crazy small. And so this took like I think 25, 30 pens. Just I wore through 30 pens just to do this one. It was crazy. This one
Oh my
was
gosh.
crazy. This one literally took 3 months. I was inspired though, right? Because I was like, oh, this is cool. I want to do this new way of doing it.
Clearly,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you should get a pen sponsor or something.
Yeah, I've tried a bunch of pens, like, but it has this. There's this one pen that has a plastic nib that's just so smooth. Because I do it straight on to gessoed panel. I don't use paper,
Hmm.
so it wears them out pretty quick. Um, and it has a different look. It's like just it's not paper, so it's different.
Do we have any questions about this one? Oh, I've got oh here. One from Shingo. If possible, can you talk about the journey from the initial outrage to Trump's policies and tweets to your own family's experience during World War II, the internment camps, and what feelings these times bring up for you in light of your family's experience?
Ooh, well,
Good
see,
one. Good
I
question.
kind of yeah. I like to express things through work. I don't really. I'm not super like expressive as far as politically and stuff like that. I do it through this work. So, I mean, the Muslim ban was like it was almost like the last stage for me. For I needed to do something. I needed to do something personally, and this is what I did instead of like going to protest march or something like that. I did the work in my studio, and that's how I've always done it. For me, it has more effect. I, I don't know if yeah. For me, that's just for me.
Yeah, I found it very inspiring that so many Japanese Americans came out against the Muslim ban.
Yeah,
Um,
and then the doc.
really as a
Yeah,
way of, to say stop repeating history,
yeah,
and so I really appreciate your work
yeah.
in that context. Another question here says, what moved you to use the words to create your artwork? New meaning to words. It gives new meaning to words are powerful. Question
Yeah,
mark. But I think,
words are trans. I wanted to transform the words. I wanted to transform the words of hatred into a thing of beauty. So the words are transformed from a definition and something that's used to destroy people into a structure that makes something beautiful. That was the whole idea behind the piece.
yeah, and you've got a lot of comments, folks who follow your work, both in your LA studio and on exhibit. Folks, are talking about how they're really inspired by your work and interested in, seeing more of these videos and, really appreciating the portrait of your grandfather. Linda included that she's led virtual tours, excuse me, of the Japanese American Museum of San Jose for school groups, and that the students find this portrait to be very powerful.
Cool.
Um, so I just wanted to share some of those comments with you in case you didn't get to see them. There's a lot of chatter. This is actually the most chatter I think we've had of our events. So it's nice to see folks really appreciating and interacting with your work.
Yeah, responding to it. They're pretty
Yeah.
emotional. I mean, those stories are so emotional. I think we have 10 up there. So I did 9 videos. I didn't finish one for. I was just I couldn't. I got stuck on that one for some reason. Angeline. It was like another immigration piece. So I was like, how am I going to do that in another video? I had done a lot on immigration. So, but there's Philippine Scouts and redlining housing discrimination. There's a lot of pieces in the show, and there's also, I think there's 14 videos. I did 14 videos total. So no, 12. I forgot. There's a lot of videos. It was a lot of work. I just
Yeah,
did videos for a while.
I know that uh, that we had planned on talking about this, I think, a little bit later. But if you could tell folks how they can see this work, I'm sure folks really want to see it. I know
Well,
it's on our website, and but go ahead.
yeah, it's on your. I mean, that's what we're here to do, is to promote the website for Jam. Um, I ha- I mean, obviously you can go to my website. I have all the videos and portraits there, and then um, uh, it's on YouTube too. I actually started a YouTube channel because I like the idea of talking about one piece in a short video, like a 3 minute video. So I started a video channel where other artists as well, can put on pieces up, and because I think it's a great idea to have a video on one piece. Most of the videos are like studio visits or artist statements or series and stuff like that. Really like the idea of having one piece, just talking about one piece. And within my series of videos, I can put my artist statement in there gradually, like build it into the narrative of the whole series of videos. So I really like the idea of the videos. I think I'll always do videos now, just because the stumbling block of writing music is, for me, is not a stumbling block. It's probably for most artists because they don't have a musical background. But this editing, and that's what I did with is electronic music, is sequencing and editing. So it's pretty easy for me to, the music's not, it's not like you're creating a huge long piece where you're creating, like themes and
Lyrics and
variations. It's just like one theme. You just have this one theme where you're creating a mood, which is, it's not so hard to create a mood.
yeah, Angela says that the music is beautiful, and I really agree. I think that it just captures so well the emotions
Yeah,
of what
yeah,
you're trying to express. And I think Chris, if you can also, I see that you've put the link to Brian's YouTube page. If you could also put the link to the exhibit at the museum, that would be great.
yeah.
And then there's another question here from Vicky. What moved you to use the words to? Oh, did we ask this question? I think we did. Yes, we did. Well, I will say that there's another question here. How long is the exhibit up?
Mm, I don't know. I think July, because we got obviously it was August. It was supposed to run through August through I think January, like now. But no one's been able to see it, so we're trying to hold it up. The museum hasn't been open, so they're just holding it up until hopefully it opens and people can see it live. Because these pieces live are a whole different thing. I mean, this is just a different way to see them. But man, when you see them live, you're like, oh my god, because they're 5 feet tall. They're like almost life size, and I hang them high so they're looking down on you. It's a whole different thing live.
I can't wait to see them in person. I've
Yeah.
been just, waiting for the museum to open because I started volunteering almost right before COVID hit. So I haven't even gone to the museum more than a couple or few times.
Uh,
So, um, let's see. Any other questions? Yeah, and Chris confirms that the exhibit has been extended through July. Any other questions from here? Oh, I've got some in my question box. Let's see. Okay. Someone's asking for links. I think links are coming, and links for the YouTube channel are in there. This Angela says that they are profound in person, and Sandy asks, Sandy says these pieces in this exhibit are not for sale. What are you going to do with them once your exhibit is done?
they're gonna. I got shows lined up. I'm keeping them together intentionally. I want to be able to show them without having to pull them back and borrow them back. So I'm gonna keep them for a while, and then at some point they'll hopefully go to institutional collection. As I want, ideally it'd be as a whole, go into like a museum collection or a collector or something, some sort of. But I haven't really thought about that. I just, they can break them. I'm keeping them together for a while. I
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to show them together. Um, because I think it's important. For me, it's my most important work.
So Sandy, if you want them later, you can be in touch with Brian. Um, then I've got some. Oh, Angela says they should be in the National Gallery. Humanity needs to see this work. And then Kurt says, I was fortunate enough to see your exhibit at West Valley, and to stand in the middle of the room at the end was humbling. And to now hear the video brings a whole new depth. Amazing work, Brian.
Yeah, the videos have been really good. They're so emotional. I mean, this Elon story and this, it's just like you're just you're just crushed by it, you know. But then you see him standing there, and that's what it is that he's standing in defiance of this whole story that happened to his father and his ancestors. Is like that's what the whole point of the story is. We stand in defiance of that stuff.
And Julie is asking if we can zoom in on this one as well.
Let's see.
I know we're going to try our best, Julie. It's the Zoom world. Ah, there it is.
Yeah, that writing's tiny. It's forever,
So
man. It was
small.
like the first coat was like, oh my god, what have I got myself into? And you could see the definition of the eyes is not, it's very rude, like compared to what I have now, what I've been doing now. I don't really have anything that's in detail of them now, but
And here's, by the way, folks, if you're looking for the link for the exhibit, it's here. There you go. And then two more things. Okay.
here's
How
the
many?
oh, there's here's some of the pieces that are up. This is the 442.
Oh, great.
That's Tiffany. So that's a later one. You could see the quality is much better. You can see I'm getting much better at rendering, and it's Ash LGBTQ. That's Angeline. Paul's a really cool story. You can see that one. You watch the video of that one. That one's really really cool. His grandmother. He's honoring his grandmother. That's the housing discrimination in LA. Military intelligence. Oh, that's my paintings. My paintings later paintings.
Oh,
I'm doing environmental series too. I need to when I take a break, I do paintings. You can see a couple of them. They're environmental, so you're breaking up the
oh
environment.
wow.
Yeah. So, but we'll stick with this. You can see the quality though. The quality of the rendering is much different, like compared to the Muslim, my neighbor.
I think that Chris is going to take over in a minute, but there's one more question I want to have answered by Joan. How many years was your family in the camp? Did they lose businesses and property when they were incarcerated?
Yeah, yeah. My mom's family. Uh, so my grandfather on my mom's side was a citizen, so he owned properties and hotels and car dealerships and stuff like that in Salinas. And I don't think they lost the property initially. It just got mismanaged. So he lost in a sense. So they came back to Salinas. My dad. See, he didn't talk about it much. Went to Nebraska for school after the war, and then came to Palo Alto. Yeah, he went to Stanford for his MBA, and then he settled in Palo Alto.
Well, thank you so much. We, really enjoyed having you today, and I know so many people appreciated your program. I think we've got quite an array of folks here, from artists to, educators, and um, I wonder if we have some musicians in the audience too. So thanks again
Maybe.
so much for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.